Hello, everybody. We have another exciting event from West here at Cambridge. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Romanowski. I'm going to be the moderator for today's discussion. So we have two excellent panelists who are joining us. So it's my pleasure to introduce Carol Yuen, founder of Alpha Grand Consulting, and Ian Chapman-Banks, founder of SQREE Technologies. Both of them are
SQREEM.
Oh, I'm sorry.
SQREEM. It's okay.
SQREEM.
It's a difficult pronunciation.
Right. I just went for what seemed intuitive to me. So both of them are graduate students here at Wolfson, and both of them are involved in WES. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Very welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so for the audience, I just wanted to make clear, you could feel free to share any of your questions. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, we'll receive your comments here. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into some questions and some discussion that we have. And maybe if we have time, we can get to some audience questions as well. So yeah, maybe we could begin by hearing a little bit about your backgrounds. How did you both get interested in entrepreneurship, and what are you focusing on now?
Yeah, over to you, Carol. You go first.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Yuen. So I'm Carol. So it's my pleasure to meeting everyone here. A little bit about my background, pretty interesting. I'm actually a third-generation banker. My grandfather founded a traditional private bank. In those days, it is called qianzhuang in Canton, China, in the 1930s. So my father, my mother, and my uncles have spent the whole career working in the commercial banks here in Hong Kong. So following the footprint of my family, I always wanted to join the banking field when I was very young. So, and personally, I do respect entrepreneurs very much, because I found entrepreneurs are very innovative. They bring changes and new ideas and new improvements to the world. And obviously, entrepreneurs create job opportunities and make significant contribution to improve the society. So interestingly, during my undergrad years, I was already a very, very active member of my undergrad university's Entrepreneurs Club. I literally attend all entrepreneurs speaker forum. Mm-hmm. And I also took entrepreneurship as one of my majors during my undergrad years. Mm-hmm. So my university at that time had an entrepreneurship center. So just before I graduated, the director of the entrepreneurship center interviewed me. So he was, in fact, an external professional consultant providing consultation service to family businesses and corporates. He suggested I should work in a large corporation, get some good trainings, and accumulated solid network and experience, and most importantly, having some savings before setting up my own business. He said over 90% of startups actually failed in the first 5 years. So he doesn't want to see me failing right after graduate, which is, you might have a difficult time getting back, into the workforce, and, just loss of confidence. So as a result, I followed the consultant's advice. I worked in a number of financial institutions, accumulated some savings, built a relatively strong network, and ultimately setting up my own firm after working 18 years in the sector.
Thank you very much for that. Ian, did you want to jump in and tell us a little bit about your background?
No, absolutely. I'm British, but I've spent my whole life overseas except for the first couple of years out of university. So the first thing that I did out of university as a physicist was not to get a job in physics. Actually, was not to get a job. Actually set up the first cheese and wine store on a high street in the UK, and it was a cheese and wine store that only dealt in unpasteurized cheeses from farms that wasn't giving their milk to be pasteurized. I ran that for 3 or 4 years, but to be honest, it was really hard. So actually, at that point, believe it or not, from a physicist to a cheese and wine guy, I actually got hired by Steve Jobs into Apple. And I really spent from 99 to 2003 in the room when all the decisions were made between Apple Steve Jobs, Tim Cook. I joined early '99. Tim Cook arrived 2001. The guy called Steve Wilhout, Phil Schiller, obviously Steve Jobs, and really we sat there. Well, I listened most of the time, and then after about 3 years, burnt out, I joined Baumer's team in Seattle, and then between that, I did a couple of startups. So I actually helped list a lottery company from China on the AIM out of London, and then I actually joined a Temasek-owned company, Sovereign Wealth Fund, that actually delisted Chartered Semiconductor and sold it for about $4 billion. And then I became the CEO of Motorola Asia Pacific, running about $6 billion P&L. I then kind of got bored with that. So I then went to Japan and raised $120 million to set up the first smartphone business since Sony in Japan. I sold that for $20 million. So clearly lost $100 million. And then in 10 years ago, I started this venture, which is a pure play AI company. So I've had a bit of corporate life, but most of my time has been in the venture world. So I've had one complete disaster, one absolute standout success, and one kind of aha. And SQREEM hopefully will be another standout success. But at the end of the day, you are going to fail at some point. So I've kind of done it a few times now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both for sharing that. It's fascinating. Yeah. So maybe you could talk now a little bit about what brought you to Cambridge and how your experience at Cambridge is kind of complementing your entrepreneurial ventures. Do you see any sort of synergy between what you're doing here now and what you're doing in your entrepreneurial life?
Yes, so what I'm doing now, I co-founded a consulting firm with my ex-banking colleagues and friends in Hong Kong in 2017. So interestingly, our combined industry experience is over 150 years because I'm actually the youngest with the founding cohort. So since we all have spent decades in the banking field, we discovered a lot of inefficiencies in the banking operations. So as a result, we want to fill the gap by providing holistic solutions to ultra high net worth clients, as well as the companies and businesses. So what we do is we combine our knowledge in commercial banking, private banking, estate planning, investment banking, and real estate investment, and blended a all-round solutions. So myself, is actually a true believer in continuing education, and I'm very passionate in historical studies. So obviously Cambridge Faculty of History is one of the best in the world. So I'm so privileged to be a student here, as well as joining the big family of Wolfson College.
We're privileged to have you.
So many people would ask me why I chose to study history. So which is, business, history, it seems nothing really connected each other. But actually as an entrepreneur, I found, not only technical skills are important, but also humanity skills, soft skills, people skills are crucial to make a business running. And, we all have to learn and know about the past in order to well prepare for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Carol. Yeah, Yuen, did you want to say anything? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess mine's a little bit more practical. So I started SQREEM, let's say about 8 years ago. 3 people around a coffee table in the Sheraton Hotel in Singapore, piece of paper, because we had paper in those days, and really kind of wrote down on a piece of paper what an AI company would look like in the future around pattern recognition, predictive analytics. And as we've grown, and when we got to COVID, right, we were up to 180 people. We've got business in 70 countries. But going through COVID, it kind of, well, slightly before COVID, I read this amazing statistic that 60 to 70% of all founders get fired at Series C, right? So you kind of have your startup, your Series A funding, Series B funding, your Series C funding. And I kind of realized that could be me. And, I did an MBA at Chicago, economics, finance, strategy, but it was quite a long time ago. And it really wasn't relevant to the entrepreneurial world. The MBA at Chicago was more designed for consulting, finance, running big companies. And then I kind of did some research and came across the Masters of Entrepreneurship. And I really wanted to be able to really develop a set of tools and techniques that allows me to kind of take the company as far as it can go. Is it Series C? Is it IPO? Is it M&A? But I actually felt pretty inequipped to be able to scale, right? I mean, what does scale mean? It means actually you're going to scale the business and your costs don't go up in proportion to how your business is increasing. And that I found very difficult to figure out to do. So actually the entrepreneurship has been, amazing. So there's 12 different topics, 12 different subjects, 3 residentials, which are all virtual, of course. And it's really helped me think about where we need to go and what I need to do. And I actually needed that kind of jolt. I also always believe that if you're going to fail fast. Learn as much as you can, fast as you can. You are going to fail. I mean, I fail every day at something, right? Doing things. There's always a crisis. And it was really good to have a framework to be able to look at that's been well tested and researched that enabled me to really think about how to scale a company. And of course, on the course is interesting. There are people that don't even have a business or a business idea, and they're like 2 years out of 2 years out of university. So there's a very wide, out of the 60, 70 people, there's a huge range of experiences and what they want to do. Some marijuana, some there's some guys who actually makes dynamite, believe it or not, for the US government. I mean, it's just so we got dynamite salesmen, we got a marijuana salesman, we got people that are selling gym kits. It's been, and now since then we got 3 guys set up Bitcoin exchanges. So they're the guys that we should all be hanging out with.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. One thing, I mean, Ian, you mentioned failure. It'd be great to hear both of you sort of talk about some of the challenges that you've faced and some of the struggles maybe that you've dealt with, or problems that you've dealt with, and sort of what has been productive. What have you both learned from those experiences? I think that'd be really interesting to hear you both elaborate on a little bit. So either maybe Carol could go first, or
Sure, challenges, especially for someone like me who used to work for a long time in the corporate world. So when you work in large corporations, you have all the support: IT, human resources, legal, accounting, you name it. When you becomes a startup entrepreneur, you have to do 2 things in order to survive. Either you have to make money to get revenue, you go on the top line, and you have to save the bottom line, meaning you have to save as much cost and expenses as much as possible. So having no more blue chip brand backing you up, you pretty much, as an entrepreneur, you have to know kind of everything. You have to get your own auditor, you have to get your own legal counsel, you have to get your IT team setting up, you have to get a good HR, you have to get a good COO. So you become an all-rounder. You came from a specialist to become a generalist. And some people were saying that, hey, you will have a better work-life balance because you can control your timetable. But the fact is, you have say your compulsory or mandatory holidays when you work for a firm, versus as an entrepreneur, we work 7/24. And our main role, like every day, and the goal is you have to solve problems. There are just different types of problems coming in round about you, and you are actually, obviously you have your team members, maybe a few of us, you have to solve all the problems by yourself. So a very good emotional intelligence, a very good health condition, for example, mentally and physically, are crucial in order to get the team going, in order to get the business going. So positive attitude is very important. So obviously you will have disagreement with your team. When you work in a large corporation, if you doesn't get along with your supervisor or your team members, you can ask for a rotation. You say, hey, you know what, I want to work in another department, or even I'll quit my job. When you deep dive into your own business, there's no return. Either you fail or you succeed. So that's what I see challenge. It's from my from my experience, from converting myself, being employed in a large corporation versus being a startup entrepreneur.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, whatever. Maybe you could go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's frameworks that that we kind of work to and think about, and just kind of made some notes. But really, the way to think about it is that you really do need to fail fast. So there's this concept of what we call design thinking and the lean startup, and then pivots for growth. So it's all predicated on, if you do have a great idea, right? How do you get an MVP, a minimum viable product? How do you get it working? How do you show it to somebody? And by the way, there's stories of people having a minimal viable product in a PowerPoint, right? How do you put it in front of who you think your customers are to get feedback and see what they think about it? And then how do you amend it? Because once you start to grow that, because you're not scaling yet, once you start to grow that MVP and you push it out, then it starts generating revenue or not, or it goes to 50, 100, 200 people, then you're going to have to pivot, right? So customer centricity is absolutely key. And your MVP, when you put it out to 4 or 5 people, they may not like it. All right, it may not work. What you think is going to work, and then you put it in front of people, it may not. So the key is that you've got to really be able to pivot very quickly and very fast. Actually, failing is okay, providing you learn from it and you can build that in to your design thinking. So that's the design thinking part. So if you incorporate failure into everything that you're doing and know it's going to happen in a framework of design thinking is all around, who are my customers? What do they want? What's the strategy? And the strategy is, the definitive strategy is doing something better than somebody else, right? So what's your unique advantage that you're going to do? If you don't have a good strategy, you are going to fail. But can you pivot from that? So there are a set of frameworks that you can literally write down on a piece of paper and really focus on to actually incorporate failure into the lean startup and building your first MVP. And that's what we do. And by the way, we've failed 1,000 times, right? And gone out, because we're coding, we can just recode it and push it out and get somebody to say yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you very much for that. One thing that I'm interested in is both of you have international experience. I think that's quite important. So Carol, you mentioned you're based in Hong Kong, and Ian, you have experience in Singapore. So both of you have experience in Asia, but also sort of how can you talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in an international context and a Western context? How do these different experience in Hong Kong and so on, maybe talk about that international component and how doing entrepreneurship sort of differs in different contexts. So maybe Ian, actually, you could go first this time.
Okay. So there is quite a lot of research around the cultural nuances of building companies in an Asian culture and a Western culture. And in an Asian culture, and there is, even from some of the professors at Judge, there is some really good behavioral research that shows that people perceive things differently in Asia and in the West. And in Asia, there's certain things you've got to be cognizant of. I mean, togetherness, being part of the problem, being selfless, right? Not all kind of, you do the polar opposite to US where it's all, relatively gung ho. So there are some very important nuances, and the further, Carol will know much more than I do, but the further north you get in Asia, especially as you get into kind of China, Korea, Japan, these cultural differences really play a massive part in how you build a company. We're based in Singapore. I mean, it's less Confucianism in terms of that way, which it kind of basically is, or Confucius, right? We're all part of this together. Let's figure this out. Teamwork is incredibly important. How do you bring teams together? The kind of the family is incredibly important. So you have to build that into the culture of the company. And the culture of the company tends to represent the culture of your immediate surroundings and the culture of made up of all your employees. So it is incredibly important. It is different enough that you do have to do things differently in Asia than you would have started something up in in Hoxton, right? As an example. I'll kind of pause there and we can dwell on that more later if need be.
Yeah, thank you very much. Carol, did you want to go ahead?
Sure, I totally agree with Yuen. The Asian culture, it's a very, very interesting topic where we all have always been, doing research and reading a lot on this particular topic. But in general, I can see similar characteristics and values for Western entrepreneurs and Asian entrepreneurs. Say, for example, innovation, risk-taking, passionate, and they all love the business. They all have a strong mindset, feeling, okay, this is right, and I can make it done. But if we look at, say, Asia in general, honestly, Asia, it's a big coverage. There are like 48 countries in Asia. So each has its own unique legal regime and economic development. So it's a little bit hard to give a one-size-fits-all conclusion. But if we are talking about North Asia in particular, which I'm more familiar with, say China and Hong Kong, most of these entrepreneurs do carry traditional Asian values. Let's say an example, the first generation entrepreneurs would usually prefer to keep full ownership or controlling stake, or they will be actually the big boss. They would be a little bit reluctant to work with strategic investors. So many times in our experience, when we try to introduce, say, private equity funds, with some family businesses or startups, they'd be saying, no, I don't want to work with people. I have my own working style, and I just can't work with others. And I don't want to spend time trying to understand each other. And so many times, an M&A situation, very obviously in Asia, it's a failure. So there are just so many failed cases. So, all these can show, like, these, say, Asian, in particular, first generation entrepreneur, they would want to retain the company as a private family business, and they expect the second or third generations to inherit the business and to run it, for generations after generations. So obviously we do see similarity in Italy, but when we look at US or UK, you look at the listed companies, you will found a very different situation. For China and Hong Kong listed companies, excluding state-owned enterprise, the shareholdingships are mostly owned by one or two substantial shareholders. They own at least 51% or at least 40% of the Lisco. But when you look at the US or UK Lisco, the founding shareholder would probably be down to, say, less than 10% in many situations, and they exit, after a certain time period. Asian entrepreneurs, especially for the first generation, are quite reluctant to exit unless that's they run into very special or exceptional circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, could you sort of talk more about maybe important trends you see for your industries? What also, we do maybe have to talk about the pandemic as well. How has that affected things? So sort of going forward, looking at the future, what are the bigger trends that you're interested in, that you're focused on, concerned about?
We could go to some. So I would think about three macro trends, which are going to shape the next 5 years, and then within those macro trends, how's it affecting what we're doing, and how's this been shaped by COVID? So clearly, deglobalization, right, is going to be a trend for the next 5 years. Clearly, governments are going to play a much bigger role in society. Clearly, you see what's happening in the US in terms of the stimulus, what's happening in the US. And the third, we are going to live with massive amounts of debt, massive amounts. Now, if you think about how do we navigate in my case, a tech company that has got business in 70 countries, which is like we're a mini multinational, right? Singapore's little red dot, 90% of our business outside Singapore. So deglobalization helps us government intervention, i.e. Singapore government, fabulous building of the ecosystem in Singapore, massive plus. Massive amounts of debt. We are awash with liquidity right now. Interest rates will go up, there's no doubt, but there's a massive amount of liquidity around. And, where's the alpha, right? The alpha is in kind of startups, right? I mean, you can't get alpha from putting money in banks anymore or bonds. So you kind of then overlay that with, in the AI world that we're in, you kind of then look at COVID. What happened at COVID? Well, COVID accelerated digital transformation by 5 years. So companies like ourselves who are delivering, behavioral insights, kind of doing digital media buying, that are providing behavioral intelligence. We do contact tracing systems. We have benefited from companies' rapid move to digitization. Not saying it's easy, but there is now a large groundswell of digitization. So if you are going into tech, then you are thinking about tech, then you just have to start digital. I've got a company that I work with here in Singapore that started off with physical figurines. And because of COVID, they could no longer sell them. Marvel, they got the license for the Marvel Action Men and sold them as collectibles. That market disappeared because China was locked down. So they actually, believe it or not, God bless them, they flipped to NFTs, right? So we all have to go digital and fast. I mean, that's what I see. Digitization is going to go even faster than it has in the past. And change is going to be a constant. So everything is always going to change. So that's how we're laying out our framework for the next 3 to 5 years, by building in these macro trends and then seeing how they're affecting us, and then kind of laying out the push to digitization in terms of how we push our business. But if you think about deglobalization, what that means is you really have, in pandemics, you really have to set your org structure around sustainable units. So we have now split our development centers into Ho Chi Minh, into Manila and Singapore, and now we're outsourcing in Eastern Europe to reduce the risk. We're now dropping teams into London, into Zurich, into New York, self-enclosed teams that can actually run a business themselves without needing to come back to the HQ. So we've built what we call, taking the lean startup ideas. We built a lean startup. We're using sprints and scrum masters now to really design our organization so that and it will happen, when the next pandemic hits us, we have literally de-risked our business. So when you go digital, you can actually start thinking about and actually planning for these events. So that's what we're thinking about on a daily basis.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. Carol, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. I actually echo Yuen's view, especially on deglobalization and digitalization. So I can share a little bit more about, from micro perspective, my personal view on the trends facing the financial sector. So very obviously, similar to Yuen's sharing, technological advancement. So at least, from my generation, spending like 20-something years in the sector, I've already seen computers replacing, say, human traders. When I first started my career in the bank, in the treasury dealing environment, we make every trade a forex trade manually. So in those days, the dealing rooms, we have those black phones and touch screen phone that is already very innovative, and there's like on-off knob that's like mute and mute, and we place trades through Reuters machine, and we yell at the trader saying, hey, I want to buy $1 yen, for example. So the trading floor, was so noisy. Everybody is like jumping, standing, yelling at each other. And at the end of the workday, you're just so tired. And I remember some colleagues were like, they lost their voice after one long day. But about 13, 14 years ago, like kind of everything kind of going semi, basically automatic. And now many trades, if you look at Financial Times and all those trading pages, you can see something called quant trades. So basically, it's all the trades, no matter it's like equities, fixed income, forex, or whatsoever. They trade purely based on algorithm. There's no human touch, no human decision, no emotional attachment, which is actually good. It's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The trade goes faster, more volume, so that's why we can see all the ups and downs going, much more basically significant, massive changes than before. And you can see the trading volume, now is massive, and things can turn upside down, say, in seconds. So all these obviously change the ecosystem, and it change the financial market as well as the financial participants as well. And that's the first trend, obviously. We can't stop the trend. That will be going even more faster. COVID actually push all the technological advancement in the sector much faster. And for my firm, for example, we do say cross-border transactions for clients. So COVID pretty much hit us in a sense that we can travel. It is complicated. There's like very stringent quarantine requirements when we exit, our city or when we're coming back. Well, good and bad. For things that we used to rely so much on physical meeting, now everything's conducted through online. In a sense, yes, we can still communicate with clients or targets or counterparties easily. We can meet more people, better time management. But the worst is if we're talking about complex M&A transactions, a human touch is still very, very important in order for you to conclude a transaction. So, well, yes and no, something good, something bad for COVID, but I think everyone has been pretty much well adapted to this new norm. Regarding Yen's point on digitalization, this is the second trend that I want to share in the financial sector. So obviously, technology creates new investment products. Crypto, everybody has been, pretty much followed this topic in the past 2-3 years. And the upcoming one is NFT, non-fungible tokens. I personally feel it is definitely an upcoming trend and strongly related to digitalization. And because of all these new investment products and new invention, we will be seeing more financial reform and more active stepping in from the legislators and from various regulators. So this is something obviously we all have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so maybe one more quick question, and we can open it up to the audience and take some audience questions. So the last thing that I sort of want to talk about, I think it's pretty important. So yeah, you're here at Cambridge. What advice do you have to students, to sort of young entrepreneurs, to people who are sort of looking? I mean, you've talked a little bit about your experience and things that you have struggled with and learned from. But yeah, what advice do you have, especially people who might want to go into your industries, people who might want to go into finance and AI and so on? Yeah, I guess what advice, what suggestions, anything that you have to share for students and for aspiring entrepreneurs at Cambridge or wherever?
Absolutely. So kind of be careful what you wish for. I would say that you should follow the trajectory, and Steve Jobs was very famous for saying, follow your passion. I absolutely do not believe that at all. I think you should find things that you're good at and you should absolutely focus on that. I think if you got an offer to join the Googles or the Facebooks or these guys or selling for business, join Google, join Facebook. Absolutely. Figure out your ideas, and then after a couple of years, then become an entrepreneur. It's highly overrated becoming an entrepreneur. Most people who become entrepreneurs because in general they don't have a good alternative, and that's why they do it, especially in younger people. So get yourself a great job, get yourself a great company, take some time, think about it, and then when you're ready, go and do it. But the most important thing, whether you're an entrepreneur or whatever you're going to go into, just make sure you're good at it and you can excel and you can progress in that field. And then if it's entrepreneurship, brilliant. Absolutely. So kind of pause there for Carol.
Yeah, great.
Same here. And, in particular, for my field, I've been running into so many situations where young graduates ask me saying that, hey, I want to work in the field of finance. I said, why? Because I can make a lot of money. I can be a millionaire in a few years' time. Usually I think this is an absolutely misconception.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, if you don't like something, if you enter into a job or a field where you're not good at, you cannot be able to excel and you won't succeed. Once you cannot be able to succeed, you cannot be able to make money. So you can put a dollar sign, basically as a priority. The most important thing is, what are you good at? As Yuen said, in the field of finance is, you have to understand your characters. Are you a numeric person? Are you someone who loves to work with people? The field of finance is so big. Commercial banking, investment banking, hedge funds, private equity funds, crypto, we can have dozens of branches of so-called finance, field of finance. So first, all in all, is understand yourself. What would you like? What is your strength? What are you good at? Put money aside. When you can excel doing something great, money will follow. So I think this is the most important thing I think every student would need to bear in mind. And no matter whether you work as an engineer or whether you work as a banker, you would expect to work for long hours. This is something that you will, deep dive into that particular sector. So you have to love it. If you hate something, every morning 6 a.m. your alarm clock rings, you just don't want to wake up and to log in and check your emails. This is just too miserable. So pick something you love, you're passionate, you're good at. And most importantly, I don't think that many people will talk about this, is integrity. I think no matter which field someone wants to work for life, for example, integrity, honesty, thinking about how you can deliver the best solutions and ideas to your clients are most important. Once you have all these elements, money will follow. Especially in the field of finance, many of us will need to handle or manage money on behalf of clients. So we have to be keeping our highest quality and integrity, and we have to be so-called whiter than white. You can put your self-interest ahead of your clients. We call it fiduciary duty. This is most important thing that I think any young graduates should keep in mind, and it will be very useful. If they want to spend their career in the field of finance, in the next whatever decades.
And I would add one more. I'd like to add one more thing, which I'm actually astonished is not talking. It's not taught at school or at college. Is that you have to take your own finances into your own hands. So what does that mean? It means put money aside each month, invest in ETFs, forget about them. You invest as much as you can into ETFs each month, leave them. At the age of 45, you can retire. They're all going to go up and down. They're going to be crazy. But if you invest money in ETFs every month, and then eventually get yourself on a housing ladder, because in many countries, housing is tax efficient. If you do those two things and you forget about them, at the age of 45, life will catch up with you, and all of a sudden, you'll be financially totally independent. And that's really what you want to be aiming for, is financial independence in about 20 years. And and no one teaches that, right? Kind of the rule of ETFs. You kind of index funds, 5 or 6% a year, and then the compound on 5 or 6% over 25 years is astonishing. That's what advice I would give anybody. Financial independence is within your grasp at the ages of 22 to 26, and it doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah, very well said, Ian. I totally agree. And especially, when many people want to start their own business, so where's the seed money? So I've been, running into many like startup investors and startup obviously entrepreneurs saying that, hey, can I raise like round A, pre-round A, can I get the first 5 million, whatever, from investors? So then I asked how much actually you have put into your business. So obviously, if you have a great ideas, then you might be able to attract some investors, but don't fancy about it. When you look at many great companies, unicorns, all these owners have basically gone through very, very difficult time for fundraising. They might have had over hundreds, I can tell, like 700, 800, even 1,000 investors in order just to raise for, say, 5 to 10 million US. And they will be, pretty much giving up a lot of their founding shareholdings, in the pre-round 8 or so. So absolutely, and you're right, having a good savings plan, start early, leverage the time values, that would be the great idea for someone who wants to start their own business down the road.
Fantastic. All right, so now I'm just going to open things up to the audience, see if we have any audience questions. Okay, so we have one to Carol. I have participated in a successful real estate tokenization project. How do you see trends in regulation and large-scale adoption of technology by high street financial institutions?
Interesting questions.
Yeah.
I personally see real estate is, well, again, my humble comment, it's a sector where we haven't been seeing a lot of disruptive technological changes or advancement. So tokenization projects, real estate sounds wonderful. The only thing we see, regulations, is, the government talks, the central bank talks, the regulators, they exchange intelligence, and they copy each other very quickly. So for the early birds, they might be able to make some good gains, or, depending, there's always some bad apples in different sectors and within the participants. So when something bad happens, the regulators will step in and they will impose very stringent regulations. So pretty much play around and having, making sure you're on the wave and not under, it's important. But definitely real estate tokenization is something interesting. And
I've got it's fascinating. I have a friend actually. He's the judge as well. He's used tokenization in Dubai. The regulators have approved this in Dubai. By the way, it's not approved anywhere else. Whereby he has participated in the funding of real estate, retail houses, apartments in the UK, and in Dubai, people can buy small slices of those houses broken up into 50 to let's say $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 lots, and it kind of all sit on the blockchain as verified. The challenge you're going to have is no one's made a decision on this. I mean, you could be a billionaire, you could go to zero in a week. He's been lucky because he's under the Dubai regulator, and they're quite progressive. So all his funding is in Dubai, his whole system is in Dubai, but Singapore, you couldn't do this, as an example. Other Asia, I know that it's not available in Asia. US, SEC haven't, as far as I know, approved this technology. So I would follow a guy called Fred Wolfson. You can Google him now. He is the foremost expert on tokens, tokenization, and where he thinks regulation is going. And he's a very famous VC, Union Square Ventures, out of Union Square in New York. And if you start following him, he's pretty sound. He's quite close to what's happening at the SEC anyway, and the rest of the world tends to follow the SEC.
Yeah, great. So maybe one last audience question, and then. Okay. So we have a question from Rachel. Rachel A. You spoke about the importance of people fit, especially in early days. And I guess Ian spoke on creating self-contained units. Can you share how you think about hiring and creating teams? All right. So I think that both of you could probably speak to that. Maybe we can kind of, yeah.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So cultural fit is astonishingly important. The two traits that research has said that you need in your team is the number one trait you should look for is openness. The second trait that you should look for is conscientious. You need a team of people that are open and conscientious. If you don't have that, you're not going to get off to a good start. Now, interesting things happen as teams get bigger, because all of a sudden you wake up one day and you've gone from 50 people in an organization where you knew everybody to 100 people where you actually don't know everybody anymore. So you can manage 0 to 50 people in an organization for culture early on. But really, once you get above 50 people in an organization, you have to embed these cultural traits. They are very, very, very important. And if you don't do that, and you go to 100 people, and you don't know everybody in the organization, they start to develop their own culture. And these self-contained units I spoke about, unless you have hired the right people into them, they will develop their own culture based on the people in that self-contained unit, which will be highly destructive to the company. So absolutely vitally important to be able to keep on top of this. And by the way, if you think about right now in Asia, I've got 150 people in Manila. We've hired and fired and hired and fired people I've never met, never seen because of COVID. We deliver PCs in the back of motorbikes. It is absolute nightmare to keep everybody culturally aligned. It's astonishingly difficult because in Manila, they've had a 2-year lockdown and a rough lockdown where you haven't been able to leave your apartment or your house, and people have been working from home. So not only are we having self-contained units, the self-contained units in Manila are one person. So it is a major challenge that we're trying to get over right now, is mass cultural misalignment in the organization, and how do you break it down into smaller silos and rebuild a culture? So it is an ever and present problem, I think, especially in Asia, where Asia's been locked down much more, or for a much longer period than Europe and the UK.
Great. So I think we'll end on Carol. Maybe you could say something about hiring and about creating teams and so on in response to Rachel's question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think openness, as Yuen said, it's crucial. And communications, making sure you have a common values within the smaller founding team. But as Yuen said, I totally agree. When you go up to, like, say, 50 or even 100 people, things start getting more complex. You might not be able to communicate with each of the staff where you just don't know whether they're happy or not. So I think keeping an on dialogue communication in whatever sense, surveys, for example, anonymous surveys, obviously, having say a work-life balance, giving them, extending care. We can only try our very best, but yet, sharing a common values. It's what as an entrepreneur or as an owner that, we all are trying to do. But obviously there will be people conflict. There will be disagreement. But yet it's just how we can be able to find a common point and trying to get, on a win-win situation. COVID definitely, it's tough. I've been like meeting my clients in the, the operations or many of them are pretty much interrupted. There's always risk, there's always chance, there's always new rewards, but yet some pretty traditional business models, all of a sudden you're asking them to go e-commerce, but they're having like thousands of standalone like retail shops. That's trying to strike a balance is difficult. They have let go so many people, many sad stories, like many families, got affected, but yet that's life. But as Yuen said, we all learn. And when we are facing another pandemic, that there will be for sure. But we just don't know what, when it will be.
Yeah.
We all will learn and will better adapt to getting the company better and getting the world better.
Okay, great. Well, that's all we have time for today, but thank you both. I thought a wonderful conversation. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have
Thank
a
you.
great
Take care.
day. And
Thank you.